His Excellency Shri Hardeep Singh Puri is the Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas from the fastest growing energy market in the world, that is India. Good to see you again, Minister. I don't think we could ask for a more balanced panel in terms of geographical representation. I laid out the challenges this industry's been faced with, and taking it from the government perspective, it's not been easy, to put it that way. I think it was the ultimate test with the pandemic, and then a year later going into severe conflict with Russia and Ukraine as a major supplier into Europe. And if you don't mind, Assistant Secretary, I'd like to start there because we've almost got lulled into thinking this is the new normal, that you have conflict and serious outbreak in the Middle East as well. And I know you have a three-pronged strategy when it comes to Ukraine and trying to tighten the noose, if you will, on Russian exports, and then we have to be realistic that energy is needed. We often overlook collaboration, and during the pandemic, it was necessary for vaccines, but it was also necessary for energy supplies, and the same comes to Russia-Ukraine. What do you think collaboration means with those members on the panel here, but in the industry as we go into year 3 of the conflict, which is quite severe? It's not an acceptable new normal, but what does it mean for the energy sector?
No, well, thank you, John, and thanks to Gastech for having me here. And I think you framed the issues very well. It's terrific to have a panel with 4 ministers of governments that the United States, the Biden administration, and I personally have worked very closely with. I think my job at the State Department is to think about how we leverage America's energy abundance to advance our national security interests. And I am doing this after 9 years living as a U.S. ambassador in Europe, which gave me a strong sense of just how dramatically the international system has been disrupted by 2 factors. Most importantly, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the weaponization of Russia's energy resources, and the fact that I think for much of the world, Russia will never again be viewed as a reliable energy supplier. But the other part of the story is something you alluded to, which is the remarkable success of America's energy producers, a lot of which lives here in Houston, and the change that that has produced in terms of America's situation. I think to answer your question, as we look forward, there's 2 things that we need to do. One is we need to work with the broadest partnership around the world. I was talking to Minister Puri, who I've known for about 3 decades at this point, about the extraordinary growth of US-India energy trade. I remember my first meeting with Minister Bayraktar in this role. We talked about Turkey's interest in signing long-term offtake contracts with American and other LNG producers, and that's now happening. With Minister Ekpo, just the other day, we had a fantastically successful first edition of a US-Nigeria energy dialogue where we talked about Nigeria's decade of gas and the opportunity that that provides for citizens in Africa, but also for America's interest in building a reliable and predictable global energy market that drives development around the world. And then Egypt, a country which I got to know very well through 6 years living in the Mediterranean. And I always think of Egypt as a Mediterranean country more than a Middle Eastern country. So I think what we need to do, first of all, we have to make sure that Russia pays a price for the extraordinary violence that it is inflicting on the citizens of Ukraine. And we have to work as hard as we can, and the Biden administration is building an international coalition with our sanctions regime, particularly to tighten the screws against Novatek and to make sure that Russia is not able to take gas that used to go to European customers through pipelines and deliver that as LNG. But we also need to be a reliable partner and a reliable supplier to India, to Turkey. We need to work with partners like Nigeria to figure out how Nigeria can leverage its fossil energy resources in the most sustainable way possible, and very, very focused on the work we're doing together on methane abatement, decarbonization, carbon sequestration, and then working with partners like Egypt in a volatile and incredibly important geopolitically region, but also a country that is working through its own energy transition with tremendous potential to be a leader in regional renewable power, clean hydrogen, but also its own work on decarbonization. So it's an incredibly exciting time to be doing this work, but also doing so on the back of America's unprecedented energy abundance.
Yeah, you've made a number of points. I want to circle back with you with the collaboration with all four, actually, on the table. I don't think a lot of people would understand the role of the State Department in doing so. So we'll get to more specifics here, particularly for Egypt and Nigeria, which I think is really interesting. Mr. Delight to see you. Last time we were together on the panel was at the opening session in ADIPEC, and your valued insights are incredible. For context, in our American market here, this is a country that's going to represent 25% of global energy demand over the next 20 years because of the pace of growth. The fastest in the G20, energy demand is growing 3 to 4%. In that context of strong demand right now and the necessity to manage your own transition, I was there doing a documentary that I talked to you about. You're bringing all the energy on board right now, literally the full deck of energy. How do you manage this in the transition? And I think it'd be worth bringing up, and you're not shy about it. You're getting about 2 million barrels a day from Russia because you need the energy. But how do you manage energy security and the transition, knowing the geopolitics of the panel that we're discussing here?
Thank you very much, John. To say that the geopolitical situation today and the turbulence which we witness is a challenge would be an understatement. Having said that, coming from where I do, we have a population of 1.4 billion people. We have something like 6 to 7 million people going to the retail outlets every day to fill up on different forms of energy. We consume 5.4 million barrels of crude a day, which we refine. We have a fairly large refining capacity. In the 3 years that I've been associated with this ministry, our daily consumption of crude has gone up from 5 million barrels to 5.4, and I see it rising. If you say that the global demand is increasing by 1%, ours is increasing by 3 times that amount. And that 25% figure which you gave us, John, I think that is in the next 2 decades, 25% of the increase in global demand will come from India.
Which is extraordinary. It was what China was 20 years ago, right?
Yes. Of all the challenges, or rather the main characterizations in the global scheme, you mentioned Russia, Ukraine, you mentioned the tensions in the Middle East, you mentioned a growing large, second largest economy, $19 trillion slowing down, etc. From our point of view, we need to ensure that we address the trilemma of availability, not to have energy available. Energy is the lifeline of the economy, of any economy, more so ours. Address availability along with affordability, and during that turbulence to manage and succeed in doing a quantum jump on the green transition. And I think that's the part with which I am most satisfied. Insofar as availability is concerned, look, we float tenders at the point of importation, that our oil companies, governments don't import energy. We have a vibrant private sector, and we have a very vibrant, what we call the oil marketing companies, which for want of an equivalent term, you could call the state sector. They float tenders at the point of importation. Traditionally, we've had, if we were importing 5 million barrels, consuming 5 million barrels, you would have them equally divided between a large number of, I think 4 or 5 in the Middle East, 4 in the Middle East, and maybe 1 rest put together. Today, the situation as I see it is there's no dearth or shortage of crude available in the world. I think there's enough around. There are new sources coming up. I'm not going to go into that. These are supply management issues which you can put on a side. What you do witness is disruptions caused by the other factors. And today, as you mentioned, one would have thought that with all this turbulence around, the price would be escalating up, but it's in the vicinity of $70. On our side, the Prime Minister, since he assumed office in 2014, has been steadfast in the green transition. So we started off in 2014 with about 1.5% of biofuel blending. Jeff is an old friend of mine. We worked together more than 30 years ago. And I have, with a great degree of satisfaction, I say we are now the world's second largest blender of biofuels. We did last month 15.9%. And we've surpassed the United States in that. Brazil was a start. The US has been in the lead. We formed a global biofuels alliance also, which we have 26 countries as members, all the international organizations. Would move there. The developments in the area of compressed biogas, green hydrogen, that is, I'm going to conclude with that. In my view, green hydrogen will succeed where you have local demand, local production, and local consumption. And I think India satisfies all that. I had very good discussions with Secretary Granholm yesterday. And I think our energy partnership, the strategic clean energy partnership, is going great guns. But in this whole process, when you face challenges, normally one gets a little anxious. I think as you face challenges, your resolve is strengthened to move on all fronts, particularly the sustainability front. And since the subject of this panel is couched in language which is from the climate debate rather than this thing, I compliment you on that. And India is willing, both in terms of sharing its expertise, and I suspect, I have a belief that some of what we are doing in India, quite a bit of what we are doing in India, is also replicable on a wider scale in the global south, especially with countries which don't have clean cooking gas. And we have now taken our mix of LNG from 6% to 15% in our energy mix. And we are also, I'm very proud of citing one statistic. We provide clean cooking gas to our households at something like 12 to 15 cents in a day. I think that is something which is replicable in the global south for their energy needs, because much of the global south does not have even basic energy. And if they were going to go down that road in an old traditional fossil fuel way, our energy challenges would be exacerbated.
Very good. What a great roundup. I had a chance to see the work that the Prime Minister and your good self have been doing on the distribution of liquid gas to households. It's been radical in the last 5 years, that distribution. Karim Badawi, it's great to see you in your new role here as Minister. You have a quarter century of experience when it comes to the private sector and energy, and you're bringing that to bear in the ministry in a very complex time. And I know Mr. Ekbo has the same challenges: currency devaluations, high inflation, growing demand for energy domestically, and this question applies to both of you, and then trying to keep your investors happy in a devaluation environment that we have today. I know you're trying to raise $1.2 billion to try to, in this fiscal year, to bring that production up of natural gas, which has been dropping. You have a strategy for renewables that'll deal with peak demand that you have in the summer months. How do you bring these together in this uncertain economic climate for some of the fast-growing developing countries like in Egypt?
Very good. Thank you very much, John, for the question, and thank you for Gastech for having us. I think I am a firm believer that Egypt plays a very important role in terms of being able to be a gateway for energy, whether in terms on the gas front or in terms of the future on the hydrogen front, as really a gateway between the east, the west, and the north. When you look at the infrastructure right in place and in terms of availability of natural resources, in Egypt, in terms on, both on gas front or on oil or in terms on the renewable front, Egypt provides a bit that equilibrium where that energy mix exists. And I will take the word on the collaboration that you mentioned, right? And I think this is the key for us to be able to unlock the full potential of those natural resources which are existing today, amidst actually the critical challenges that you enumerated and that we're all facing and so forth. Today, the way for us is really to be able to see how we can provide an economic environment which is conducive for attraction of investment into the sector and introduction of an investment in low carbon sector, right, in terms of how we can make it in a more reliable way, in a more sustainable way, and in a more energy efficient way. And for us to be able to deal with the challenges of the current situations that we're facing, we're really leveraging on a few different levers to promote that investment. The first part is very close engagement with our partners to be able to have that visibility in terms on the impact that you mentioned on the devaluation or on the currencies, right, that we faced, in terms on how we can re-energize really the activities both in the development and in the exploration front, and how we can really enable our partners in the region to enable not only unlocking the full potential which exists in Egypt from their different concessions, whereby we've launched a series of actually incentives, right, to be able to export, right, the gas, right, from the 1st of September, to be able to unlock that full potential in terms on gas as Egypt as an export hub for their natural resources. And by working internally on renewing really kind of the commitment on the energy, on the renewable energy front, whereby the Energy Council of Egypt, right, with the new cabinet, we have re-energized really our 2030 vision by really making renewables as, reaching 42% and so forth.
By 2030,
by
is that
2030,
correct? Yeah, it's extraordinary.
As a key signal that this is really clearly the way forward to be able to have a positive impact on the environment and to enable actually Egypt to be able to unlock the use of its natural gas for value-added, derivatives, right, instead of being used for, power stations and so forth. And in parallel with this, you'll have seen a lot of contracts being signed in terms of increasing the renewable energy available of incremental of 4 gigawatt between now and next summer, and how we can also work with our partners in the region to be able to unlock the full potential of technology. I'm a firm believer that technology will be kind of the enabler for us to unlock that potential, and hence working really with our partners of how to leverage technology to be able to maximize the production from existing fields, to be able to have incentive from incremental production, but also how we can leverage also technology to accelerate exploration activity and first gas production from the various fields. And to complement that is also how we can work in partnership with also our partners in the other countries in the region to be able to use Egypt infrastructure as a gateway for monetization of gas reserves in other parts in the East Mediterranean, to be able to use the facilities of Egypt for export, to use Egypt vast local, let's say, demand for local consumption as another avenue of monetization at agreed pricing. And then third element of how we can use the very vast infrastructure on the petrochemical and refining to create value-added products and so forth.
Thank you.
And all of that in the combination also with the East Med, also collaboration, right, that we have with our partners in the region.
Thanks very much. Sorry for the cough there. I didn't mean to interrupt your final statement. And I want to circle back with you on the power of the Eastern Med, because it was overlooked before we had the crisis, as the Assistant Secretary is aware. Mr. Ekbo, you have a similar challenge, the same thing that faced with Egypt. You've gone through devaluations. The consumers have high demand, high expectations that the government will deliver. President Tinubu has called this, as Chris was saying in his opening remark, decade of gas and getting that potential out there. The CEO of NNPC, Mr. Melli, was saying it's a war against those that are holding back the production of oil from 1.7 down to 1.2. How do you face that challenge here and leverage that gas potential for Nigeria for domestic demand, as you know, but the vital interests of the US and other players to make sure we have balanced supplies coming into Europe and other key hubs for growth? Are your investors with you on this?
Right, thank you very much. I am happy to be here once again. I bring you greetings from the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu. To commence with, let me express my sincere thanks to Assistant Secretary Geoffrey Piat for the wonderful collaboration, insight we gained from our discussions a few days ago in Washington. Thank you very much. Yeah, for Nigeria, we are very dedicated about the usage of natural gas. And of course, energy transition is a concern for every nation. but the equitable distribution or ensuring energy security calls for concern. In Nigeria, the president is very intentional about the utilization of natural gas to drive the economy of the nation, beginning with what we call presidential initiative on CNG to drive the transportation sector. We have LPG penetration to supply gas to every home, that is to reduce carbon emission. And on the third level, we talk about LNG for power generation, industrial development, and for export. Nigeria is committed to all these aspects of it. And for now, in the area of LNG, irrespective of the geopolitical conflict, we are still sustaining our relationship with our customers. The LNG, they keep on supplying to those countries. And recently, we have customers from China and Japan joining in the league. So Nigeria is committed to the task of energy transition and going clean. So as a country, we are embarking on certain initiatives to cushion the effects of the transition. Because before now, the whole thing has been on using oil, but we are trying to come down to mitigate climate change. So we have embarked on certain initiatives like OB3 in Nigeria, AKK, because basically what we have in Nigeria, we have the southern and the northern part, and gas and the petroleum products are within the southern part of the country. So to carry on with the upper part of the country, you need to connect a gas pipeline, that is the infrastructure, to take the gas up from the southern part to the northern part. That has been done with the collaboration of a Nigerian oil company, the NNPC. On the OB3, they're about 97% completed, which means by next year, they will start the massive production or upstream of gas within the southern part of the country. Of course, this has hindered the production of gas within the area. Then the AKK is what will take gas to the northern part of the country, through there into Algeria, and we have a contract or agreement negotiation with the geopolitical or the regional part of our country, like Morocco and Algeria. These are channels of sending gas to those that are really in need within the EU. It is important to note that before 2021, gas was not given the attention it is being given now. With the emergence of the Petroleum Industrial Act, PIA, 2021, the attention has been drawn into that sector, providing enabling environment, legislative framework to encourage gas production. So that has been the issue. So today, we talk about gas, and Nigeria is one of the countries that exports gas to other countries that are in need of it. In addition to that, the president has made some policies and the executive orders to ensure tax incentive, exemption, and remission to encourage investors to come into the sector and invest. And so it is an avenue to tell the world that Nigeria is open for business. Anybody that wants to come, any company that wants to come and invest in Nigeria, you are welcome. All the conditions has been relaxed. It provides a conducive environment for you to invest and make even for your investment. So Nigeria is open. So I welcome all of us to identify with Nigeria. Beyond this, going green, we are collaborating with other countries, like the negotiation we had with Assistant Secretary Payat with his team. We talk about energy, hydrogen development, solar power development, though that one we have started in our country by the Power Ministry, and of course, looking into the nuclear aspect of it. So we are really committed to the task of making sure we don't contribute anything negative emission into the atmosphere. Rather, we work towards mitigating the climate change.
Okay. Thank you very much, Minister. It's excellent. I want to also talk to you, if we have the time. You had all the acronyms, AKK and the OB3 for internal pipelines, but the work with Equatorial Guinea, which is very interesting for potential as an LNG hub, and then the Trans-Sahara pipeline, which has its challenges, but it's got a great vision attached to it. Minister Alparslan, we know in this audience, of course, the extremely important role of Turkey as an energy hub for oil and natural gas. I think the most important development has been your development in the Black Sea, which is giving you kind of domestic resources while you're developing renewables, solar and wind, at quite a fast pace. Has that been a game changer in terms of energy security as you see it, and avoiding some of the geopolitics in the neighborhood of the Middle East and straddling Europe and Asia as you do?
Sure. Thank you, John. But very briefly, I would like to say a few words about the three challenges that we are facing in our market. Number one is our demand is growing. Turkey is a growing market. So we need energy each and every single day for a household, for the industry, for other parts of the economy. And the second, 2/3 of primary energy comes to Turkey through imported resources. So we have a highly import-dependent country. So, and another challenge is our energy transition journey towards the beginning of mid-century. Turkey would like to become carbon neutral economy. So all the policies that we are developing basically to address and to surpass these three challenges: meeting growing demand, reducing import dependency, and energy transition journey. So that's why we are in a position that we cannot say no to any alternative solution or any alternative energy resources coming from any direction. And in that perspective, we try to develop a long-term, ambitious upstream program in Turkey. That's why in 2020, we were able to discover the Black Sea gas field. And less than 40 years' time, we were able to bring almost 7.5 million cubic meter of gas production, which means we can supply 2.6 million households in Turkey from our own gas production. And there is a great potential to grow these numbers. At the same time, we are investing heavily on our gas infrastructure, underground storage, regasification terminals. We almost increased the capacity of regasification for 5-fold. And now the whole supply portfolio is changing, transforming from long-term pipeline gas contracts towards more like a flexible long-term LNG contracts. So this makes a huge difference in the market, and we are bringing more competitive solutions to the market through this infrastructure investment. But yes, we have a very ambitious renewable program that we would like to increase our renewable power generation capacity to 100 gigawatts, solar and wind, in the year 2035.
Where are you now in that total?
It's 30 gigawatts now.
Oh, wow,
we will add 70, almost 2.5-fold it will increase. But again, we cannot say to nuclear, for instance. That's why we would like to add nuclear into our energy mix. Nuclear, large-scale conventional nuclear power plant, plus small modular micro reactors as well. And one last element, all these policy that we are developing requires like a 360-degree view. What do I mean by that? We would like to also focus the whole value chain from critical minerals, we haven't discussed too much in here, but from critical minerals exploration and extraction to manufacturing of solar panels and some new technologies, as well as to digitalize our network and increase the capacity of our transmission grid to be able to integrate more renewables, as well as to integrate our grid to neighboring markets to be able to have a more efficient system operations.
Yeah, so if you take a step back, if you look at Egypt, Nigeria, and Turkey, all playing vital roles in their regions of the world as developing as a hub, for example. You say the same thing, Karim, for the Eastern Mediterranean, and Nigeria's ability to change the game if it can get that connectivity on natural gas is extraordinary. We only have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to ask for 1-minute interventions times 5, right? So you got to adhere to it, otherwise I have to interrupt. There's a big question to ask. Many in this audience here and our International United Nations of Gas gathering here want to know if policies will change when it comes to the treatment of hydrocarbons in the U.S., Assistant Secretary, and the role of the IRA on accelerating the transition. How do we get the balance right where we don't kill off, if you will, that game-changing role of natural gas and the oil production we see, and getting the balance right? Can it survive presidential politics is the big question.
So, John, I don't do U.S. domestic politics, but let me answer the question this way. We have on this panel today representatives, ministers from 4 pivotal states. The choices that these countries make about their own energy pathways as they cope with rapidly growing populations and rapidly growing demand for energy are going to have a critical impact on how we collectively meet our climate goals. The United States wants to be the partner of choice for India, for Egypt, for Nigeria, for Turkey. We want our companies to be the principal partners, working both in traditional energy, a reliable supplier of gas to those who are importers, a supplier of technology to help all these countries decarbonize their industries, both their hard-to-abate industrial sectors, but also their traditional energy production, but also to be their principal partners as we all work through the energy transition. I think that's the biggest single question we face in the global climate story is not what's going to happen with energy transition here in the United States or in the other G7 countries in Europe, because that pathway is already set. The big question is what happens in these pivotal states. And in that area, I think we have a tremendous opportunity, leveraging America's abundance, energy abundance, leveraging the unrivaled ability of American capitalism to match up technology with opportunity, and leveraging what happens at our universities and our Department of Energy laboratories across the United States to really push the envelope in terms of how we deliver the energy that our societies need to move forward.
Good. I think from India, I think it would be great, Mr. Puri, if you can see if you're alarmed about the energy transition. I mean, we're having a much more sober conversation about the need for energy security. And I'd love to get the comments from all of you, because we're behind the curve when it comes to climate. India's had flooding, and it had extreme heat. Egypt's the same way. Nigeria, Turkey is in the heat zone as well. Can you get the balance right where you supply energy for the needs of your people and be cognizant of the climate challenge that's on our table? All 4 of you can address it very quickly, please. I'm short of time.
John, I think the choice has been made. We have to make that transition, and we are making that transition. We are doing much better on the transition front than I would have expected, say, 10 years ago. But in order to be able to successfully navigate that transition, you also have to survive the present. You asked a very loaded question to my friend here about what the state of the US thinking will be post the November election, all right? Like a true seasoned diplomat, he pushed the ball into the direction of these. Let me assure you.
He's a big boy. He knows what he's doing.
He's an old friend. Let me tell you.
And he knows the clock's running against me. I would be dogging him all over the place. Here.
Our choice has been made. That is, we will step on the gas, the kind of green hydrogen collaboration. We are going into the manufacture of electrolyzers. We are collaborating on technology to make the change. We are doing whatever it can, whether it comes to sustainable aviation fuel and all the others. We make the choice. But equally, I think, this narrative has to be anchored in the real world. And the real world is, till those quantities are ready, that is, you're able to, I mean, Brazil is a country which is able at the retail point to supply 60%, 80% biofuels in a car, etc. We are at the 20% target rate, which we'll achieve by October next year. We will go further. We will go into compressed biogas. We will go into green hydrogen. What are we looking at in 2030? I think an absolute affirmation. And I think the choice we have made is clear. I've had bilateral discussions yesterday. I think what they've done in the IRA, they are also locking in. So I think given the goodwill in the world today, I don't think there's any turning our backs on the green transition. I don't think anybody wants to. What pace you can calibrate the thing depends on. And my worry continues to be, John, that there are parts, large parts of the global south where even the basic energy is not available. You've got to make it available, because all the transition you make here will be undermined in a very profound way unless we're able to ensure that balance.
Good. Very good. Thanks a lot for the analysis there. And I think that's been a much more sober conversation in the last 12 months since we were doing other roundtables together. Kareem, renewables are part of your solution, right? Because that fast-growing demand. But is it about the calibration? Because you can raise money for renewables, but leverage that Eastern Med to its full potential, as the Assistant Secretary was saying?
I think all the different pathways are relevant. So it's going to be a combination of different pathways. I mean, I fully agree, really, that the decision in terms of moving into renewable is done. And if anybody had any doubt, there are no doubts there. I think now technology exists, the pace for us to be able to scale exists, and I think now it's really about developing that ecosystem whereby we can, again, I like to use the word of hub, for Egypt to be able to complement really that ecosystem, because the sources, whether in terms of wind and solar, exist to be able to provide that pool of renewable energy, of enabling actually the Egypt to be able to leverage the natural resources from also its people and capabilities and unlocking the potential technology exist, but also as well in terms of helping decarbonize, because again, we also have on the subsurface can also be used not only to extract natural gas and so forth, but also to be able to look at also CCS as a way as well to be able to decarbonize other industries to become actually more green and to be able to unlock also potential for exports into Europe, into the US, or into other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's extraordinary because we didn't globally map very well because we kind of ignored the Eastern Med with an overdependence on Russia, I'd say, but that conversation has clearly changed in the last 4 years. If we can get 30 seconds from both of you each, if you don't mind, because I've got the little people talking in my ear telling me to get off the stage, John. Minister Ekpo, I think the point that Minister Puri brought up is very important about the Global South. We have 2.3 billion people that don't have access to cooking fuel around the world, 600 million overall that have no access to energy. Do you think that we finally woke up to the challenge to balance access to energy as part of the energy trilemma, and Nigeria's helped with that, solving that understanding?
Yeah, thank you very much. When you were making the introduction, you talked about a decade of gas. On that decade of gas, we are working on the projects that will ramp up the production from what we have today. I think it's about 7-point-something billion per day. And we have identified 20 new projects that will ramp up our production to up to 12.5 billion by 2020, so as to meet up the demands of the people. Recall that Nigeria has about 2.8 trillion cubic feet of proven gas reserved that we can take advantage of that. Beyond that, I've talked about our collaboration with the US-Nigeria Energy Security Dialogue to develop other means of tackling clean energy security within the country. But beyond that, I want us to look at issue of energy security, and to be equitable about it when you consider the growing population in Africa, and so that we'll be able to cushion the effect of energy security in parts of Africa that are suffering from energy poverty.
Yeah, in fact, in this debate in Gastech, I know at ADIPEC and the other, even the Global Energy Transition seminar this summer in Milan, this was a bigger part of the conversation. Now, you can't overlook access to energy and security for people. The geopolitics, Minister, if I can bring it up, we had a meeting with President Azizi and the President of Turkey, of course, Mr. Erdogan. And this is where geopolitical solutions are available and where collaboration can be reset, because we've had a lot of trust broken in the pandemic, a lot of trust broken with the Russia-Ukraine war. Do you see us making a pivot here in the Middle East region, two major players with Egypt and Turkey collaborating where energy can be secure, and the roles that you two play together?
Indeed, we are collaborating, and I think it is beyond also Middle East to Europe, because we are playing a major role in here to security of supply of mainly Southeastern European region. Because the gas is quite crucial, not only for Turkey, but also for the region. And since we started to produce our own gas, but at the same time, we invested heavily on pipelines international projects. We invested heavily on regasification capacity to increase in the country. Now we are able to bring more than we need. Turkey is the 4th largest gas market in the continental Europe, around like a 50 BCM. And with this infrastructure, with the neighboring countries and also a reliable supplier from the other parts of the world, we can bring almost 75 BCM gas to the Turkish market. And this excess 25 BCM, we can easily export to European market.
Interesting.
All we need to do is we need to increase interconnection capacities between neighboring countries, neighboring nations, Turkey and Greece, Turkey and Bulgaria mainly. And through that, we are able to, again, to bring this gas to mainly European market. And what we believe that if we are able to strike a right balance between producer countries, transporter countries, and consumer countries, we are going to be able to have a long-term and successful energy cooperation. And what we are saying that we are offering a Turkish blend, I call it Turkish blend, that we can bring so many different gas from different countries. US LNG is playing a very major role in Turkish market, and pipe gas from different countries, and our own production, we're able to have this Turkish blend to offer the European markets.
Good. We had 2 monikers emerge from this, the UN of gas, and this is the Turkish delight of gas, right? Your optionality that you're offering everybody. A pleasure to have all of you here on the round table. I appreciate your directed answers and the dialogue. We could have gone another 40 minutes, I think, with the complexities of geopolitics and geoeconomics in the energy world. We're going to take a group photo with you here on the panel. And before we do, I'd love to give you a nice Southern thanks to you for the participation, gentlemen. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks again. Huh? Thanks.
Minister,
Great sketch.
thank
Excellent.
you.